Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the ES6 training. And in this video I would like to talk about the three things. The first one is the static keyword, or also known as the static function, which gives you a lot of liberty, and I'll talk about that in a second. And also we'll talk about the getters and the setters. Okay, so now let's first talk about the static functions. Now static functions are really awesome. They give you the liberty of not creating an object or not initiating or instantiating an object, and rather directly use the functions or methods defined in a class. And what I mean by that, so let's just try to define a simple class of Uber. I know Uber is my favorite, and after that I would like to just define a method there or function there. So how do we define that? Let's just call this as say hi, and this is going to be my method. It's not going to be doing much right now. It's simply going to print onto the console.log, and it's going to say I am a static function. Okay. Now in order to make any function static, all you have to do is use the keyword static there, and that's it. That's what you need to do. Now instead of doing the things like let driver equals new Uber and just like that, you don't need to do this kind of stuff. You can just completely you don't need this. Instead, what you could have done, instead of making another object or doing an instantiation there, you could just get rid of this. You could have directly called Uber, and you could have simply said dot say hi there, and that's it. Let's clear that and run that, and there we go. So this is one of the easiest way to make static function, because sometimes you don't want to go into the creation of the objects and just like that, because mainly these static functions are used in the helper class, where you just want a simple class to be helping you out in other classes, and you don't want to utilize them by creating an object and just like that. So pretty simple and used quite a lot. Now let's go ahead, and I would like to just remove this completely because we don't need it now. We want to talk about the getters and setters now. So let's create another class there, and this is going to be again a class of, let's just say, driver there for the Uber. I know I'm a big fan of the Uber, and most of the examples here I'm using the Uber there. So this is our driver, and just like always we are going to have a constructor there, and pretty easy. Now the driver is obviously going to have a name, and that is no surprise at all. Now what I want to do with the getters and setters, what basically we do with the getters and setters, is actually to control the class quite a lot. Now with the controlling, I simply means what is coming up into the class and what is going out from the class is being controlled. And this is one of the good example of polymorphism there. But rather not going into the technical details, I just want to say that yes, sometimes we want to control what's coming into the class and what's coming out to the class, and what is our control power there. We like to use the getters and setters there. So what we want to call is simply this dot name equals name. This is a simple constructor that we have gone through there, but there is one more thing that you will see in the coding quite a lot, and I'll come back in a second there. Now, how do we define getters and setters? Simply use the keyword get there, and then you can define a simple function. And I'll call this as, let's just say, my name there, and there we go. This is my getter. Now, getter simply means it's get the value. It doesn't do anything with the value, it just gets the value. So simply just having a return, and we're gonna say this dot name. So it gives you the value. Now, one more thing that you will see quite a lot in these kinds of simple getters and setters is the usage of the underscore. Now since this is a private member there, it's pretty common to use an underscore there, because this is a private member there, and you'll see this quite a lot, and therefore this is going to be an underscore name as well. So this is pretty common, and make sure that you make a habit there, because whenever you use the getters and setters, you are actually accessing the private members there. So this is a common syntax there, and that's all about it. This is the getter. Now setter is just like the other flip side of the coin. The setters is there. Setters set the values. It changes something into the value. For example, in the set, and obviously usually the name of the function is same, so set my name, and it's gonna have a simple name there. So I'll simply get a value there. So I'll call this as simply value, just nothing fancy there. Okay. And usually you will find the conditions there, because if you'll just set the value, that really doesn't make sense. So it just sets the value. So right now we are not doing any if else clauses there, but that is why it is being used for. So for example, let's just set this value for example here. So it's gonna say this dot again underscore name, and it is being set to val. But again, with this I would like to mention here that usually there is an if and a clause into the setters, because just setting the values again make it a setter, but doesn't really will fix up into your logic, because if you are using getters and setters, so getters is simply to get the value. Of course, it doesn't really make sense to do much of the programming in getters, but in the setters it makes sense to make much of the programming scenario there, because you're just setting the value and you want to check some things. Like for example, you are setting a username, you might want to check the uniqueness of the username there. Right now we are having a simple scenario. This is our getter, this is our setter, and that's what we are doing. Now how do we use it? It's pretty simple. So for example, let's just call this as drive equals new driver there, or we could have used a name there, but I think that's okay in this case. And since our constructor demands a name there, so let's just give it the most popular name on the planet, the John. And then after, you can simply have a console.log for the drive dot, let's access the name there, my name. So there we go. Okay, let's just clear that and run that, and there we go, John, no big deal. So we are accessing this time dot my name there. Now this is what we are accessing the getter, because it's getting the value. You could have also accessed the setter as well, just with the same things. So it's going to be simply drive dot my name, and this time if you pass on a value there, or not like that, pass on a value just like that, then simply this value is going to be passed on, and it will set the value from John to, let's just say, Johnny there. And then if I try to print it up, let me just now access this. Now it's gonna be Johnny there. So previously it was John, now it's Johnny. So obviously you might want to do some if and else clause there. For example, if let's just say if val dot length or something like that, length is equals to, or maybe at least greater than 5 or 6, then you're trying to put a username there. So in that case, let me just get this line, Command X, Command V, Control C or Control V, whatever you like to have. So this is what we have. Or you can also make else if clauses and all of that. So in this case, let's just clear that and run that. It says John because the value was not greater than 6, so that's why it's not allowing us to set. So makes much more sense that the setter should be followed up with the if and else condition, so that you can actually control whether the value should be set or not. And if I say Johnny John Han, no, that's not good. Johnny John, and just like that, clear that and run that. Now it's able to set that. So it makes much more sense with the getters and setters if you use an if else clause there. So these are just to make sure that you control what's coming into your class and what's going out of your class, and also to make sure that whether you are able to set that value or not. So that is why getters and setters are there. And in fact, in most of the programming, you'll see that the getters and setters are used quite a lot. In fact, in the languages like Swift, everybody recommends to use getters and setters. But again, they are completely optional. You don't need to use them. You can also work around without them as well. But again, the more control in the class that you have, the more awesome it's going to be in the future life. And with this, I'll catch you up in the next video.